Hello friends, I am Saket Bansal and in this video I am talking about PMP Certification Exams Content Outline. A lot of time I get a query from various PMP aspirants that what kind of content, what kind of knowledge they acquire by doing the PMP certification. Now, many of you must be knowing that PMP is all about a PMBOK. The PMBOK guide is about project lifecycle, project management processes, project management process groups, and project management knowledge areas. A project lifecycle, series of phases connecting project from end to start to end. Project lifecycle is a collection of phases. Each phase may have distinguished focus. There could be a different type of relationship between phases. Could be overlapping, could be serial, could be iterative in nature. So in PMBOK, we do talk about various project management life cycles. In general, we usually observe three types of project management life cycle. One is productive. The predictive life cycle is a type of life cycle where we can project or we can plan well the subsequent phases of projects. Means we have been doing that kind of work frequently and the industry is not that dynamic. So those type of projects follows a productive life cycle. The second type of life cycle which is discussed in PMBOK is iterative and incremental life cycle. In this type of projects, we iterate. We do a set of work for a duration and after that we take a feedback on a given work. And the remaining duration or the remaining phases of that particular project depends upon the feedback or the knowledge we acquire in these iterations. So we deliver the project with a series of iterations. Adaptive. Adaptive is a third category or a type of project lifecycle which is recently added in PMBOK version 5. This is all about agile way of managing projects. It's more or less same like iterative and incremental, but the adaptation cycles, the exploration cycles are further short. Iterations may run for 1 to 3 months, but here the iteration in adaptive life cycles are weekly. So we identify some work and we perform 1 to 4 weeks kind of a exploration cycle, and during that 1 to 4 weeks of exploration cycle we keep exploring or refining the work which is needed to be done in upcoming iterations. Usually a methodology like Scrum fits into an adaptive life cycle approach. Process. Now the complete PMBOK is a collection of 47 processes. What is process? A process is a type of work which has a defined inputs, follows some guidelines, some tools and techniques, some steps, and produces a distinct output. So a group of activities which takes some inputs and produces an output which can be used further in remaining processes or in a remaining area of a project management is called a process as far as a PMBOK is concerned. Now in order to manage project, we need to work with two types of processes. One type of processes which are given in PMBOK, which are 47 in number, is all about project processes. These are the processes which are needed for managing project well, irrespective of domain. Like you need to always plan for your resources. You also need to do some scope definition. Irrespective of your domain, you would be having a process where you can collect the requirement and produce a requirement document as an output. So these type of project management related processes are called project processes. And these processes, the 47 processes, are part of PMBOK. In order to manage project well, you also need to work with a different type of processes which is called product processes. Now these product processes are domain specific processes. IT project will be having a way of identifying requirements, a way of doing development work. A construction project will be having a way of doing a construction or a layouting of a given building. Now those kind of domain processes are out of this PMBOK because PMBOK just is a subset of project management related processes. But in order to execute your project well, as a project manager, you should be aware of product as well as project processes. Now the third thing, project management process groups. So I spoke about a life cycle, then we spoke about processes. These are discrete processes, the 47 processes. Now these 47 discrete processes are grouped in 5 process groups. The processes which are needed during the initial stage of the project or initial stage of any project phase are grouped under initiating process group. The processes which helps us in plan are grouped under planning process groups. The processes which has more to do with getting the work done are grouped under executing process group. The process which are more towards monitoring and controlling, evaluating how well we are performing against our project plan are grouped under monitoring and controlling process groups. The processes which helps us in finishing our work or finishing our project phase are grouped under closing process group. Initiating process group is all about doing a business case analysis, helping a stakeholders or a sponsor to create a project charter, identifying relevant stakeholders for a given project. So in this particular process group, we have 2 processes. The planning process group. So you start with a scope statement, you get a high level scope statement, you elaborate it, you detail it out, then you create activity lists, tasks, then you allocate people to it, then you do a cost estimation, then you plan about your quality, you gather individual for your project work, you plan about your human resource allocation or acquisition in your project, you also perform risk management related activities. So these all planning activities are grouped under planning process group. And you know, out of 47, how many processes we have in planning process group? 24. This one is a process group which has the maximum number of processes in it. After planning, you need to get this work done, and that is why we have processes under executing process groups. We have 8 processes under executing process group, and these processes are more to do with ensuring the execution part in your project. Now, as a project manager, we don't see many processes following under this particular group because most of your product processes will be getting executed during executing process group. But in PMBOK, the processes which we have in executing process group helps us in coordinating the work which is done under various domain areas, and it also helps us in ensuring that people are working as per the plan which we have made in our planning processes. It also helps us that there are processes to maintain or motivate or develop teams. Monitoring and controlling process group, a process which helps us in doing a variance analysis. So you started with a plan, you did some execution, or you led some execution or managed some execution work. After that, this execution work is generating a lot of data. I am done with this work could not be done, the cost was high, this particular material is not available. So this all data, these all things are getting generated in executing. Now, in monitoring and control process group, we'll look at what was our plan, what was the reality, and what all corrective and preventive actions we should take in order to bring the project alignment with our planning or bring the planning alignment with the execution. These all triggers get generated by monitoring and controlling process group. It also has processes which helps us in generating various monitoring reports, because as a project manager, you also need to communicate a project status to various stakeholders. Closing process group. So now you want to close the work or a phase. What is phase? it is coming from project lifecycle. So one project may get executed with a series of phases. So every phase end or at the project end, you perform some activities which falls under closing process groups. Like you may do a lesson learn meeting, you may archive reports or records which got generated in a given project or a phase. You also formally declares the closure of given project or a given phase. Now when we talk about these processes, a lot of time it creates a perception that these processes are serial in nature. We only do planning once and a planning should be done for the complete project. This is not true. It all depends upon type of project life cycle you are performing. The planning, executing and monitoring and control has to work in a cycle. They keep giving feedbacks to each other, and whenever we are getting into a new phase, we always perform an initiating activity, and before closing a given phase, we also perform a closing related activities. So we should not get a perception where we start thinking that initiating only comes at the beginning of the project, closing only happens at the end of the project, and planning is also happens once. So they are iterative in nature. Now the another dimension, knowledge area. Now these 47 processes are further grouped under knowledge areas. So we have 10 knowledge areas. So you can think like a matrix. You have process groups, which is like a vertical lines, and then you have a horizontal lines, which are knowledge areas. In PMBOK, we have chapters knowledge area wise. Knowledge area could be looked as an area of specialization, a particular subject knowledge. For example, cost management is a knowledge area. And this knowledge area talks about everything which is related to money. Time management is a knowledge area which talks about everything related to time dimension of the project. In PMBOK Guide 5th edition, we have 10 knowledge areas. Project integration management, project scope management, project time management, project cost management, project quality management, project human resource management, project communication management, project risk management, project procurement management, and project stakeholder management. A first knowledge area, project integration management. Now I spoke about 47 project processes in PMBOK. Now we need some processes or a knowledge area which integrates all these processes. So we have 6 processes in project integration management, and these 6 processes integrates the remaining 41 processes. The goal of project integration management is initiating the project and closing the project and coordinating or integrating all the remaining activities which happens between beginning and end of the project. The activities like making a project management plan. Since a project management plan is a collection of various other plans like human resource plan, quality plan, risk management plan, procurement management plan. So we need to have an integrated plan. A project management plan get prepared in project integration management. An integrated change management happens in project integration management. Managing of the direct execution, like what people are working on, is also done in this particular knowledge area. As I said before, we have 2 dimensions. One is knowledge area and another is process groups. The project management processes could be looked in 2 dimensions. We have process groups and we have knowledge areas. And this is the first knowledge area, project integration management. And in this particular slide, we try to depict this relationship. So you can visualize that in an initiating process group, we have a process called develop project charter. Now, since you are at the initial stage of your PMP journey, you may get into the detail of this process at this stage, but it's good to feel that yes, this is a process which gives us a project charter, a formal kickoff for a project work. Now, under a planning process group, we have a process called develop project management plan. Now, in this particular process, we develop an integrated project management plan. The output comes as a project management plan for a given project. Now, in the executing process group, we have direct and manage project work. A process sits in integration management knowledge area responsible for directing and managing project execution related activities. Most of your product processes will be getting coordinated or work with this particular process. In a monitoring and control process group, we have monitor and control project work. Now, we have various knowledge areas. Each knowledge area will have their own monitoring process. Like, we have a cost control or a monitor control cost process which monitors the cost related area of a project. But at this level, this process integrates all monitor and control project work related activity and produces a consolidated project status. In the same process group, we also have perform integrated change control. Now, change is something which is going to be there in your project. This process helps integrating all change requests and ensuring that whenever we are changing one dimension of a project, we ensure that remaining dimensions are also looked at, and overall it makes sense to go with that particular change. Once we are done with all this, we have a process, close project or phase. This helps us closing the work, closing the project or a phase. Project scope management, a second knowledge area which talks about all processes which are dealing with project scope. What do? You need to identify the requirements first. After identifying customer needs, documenting them into a customer requirement statement, you need to convert or extract scope for the project out of it. So you have a process, you have activities which helps you to make a project scope statement. In order to manage your project scope well, it's always advisable to create an hierarchical diagram of your project scope work, and which is called a work breakdown structure. Now, this all was a part of planning related to project scope, knowledge area project scope, process groups, planning. Once you are done with this, you also need to have a process to make sure that whatever you have planned is getting executed. So you have a process in controlling process group as well. Now, when we look at the two-dimensional figure of project scope management, you can see that we only have processes in two process groups: planning and monitoring and control process. In planning, we have a first process about planning the project scope management. We need to identify how are we going to collect requirement or document requirements, what process we will use to get a customer acceptance. So our first process of a project scope management is about doing the planning work for this knowledge area. Once we are done with that planning work, we need to start interacting with customer or users or stakeholders and collect their need. And that is where our second process comes into the picture, where we talk about collect requirement. This process gives us a detailed requirement document. Now, once we have this requirement document, we identify how this project is going to meet these requirements. And from there, the scope statements comes into the picture. So we prepare the scope statement. Now, once you have the scope statement, you need to also work on, in our fourth process, create work breakdown structure, because we want to graphically represent the project scope into a manageable components. So at the leaf level, you have a manageable work package which can be further divided into activities and get allocated to individuals. the work breakdown structure helps us in visualizing what all is included in this particular project. Now these were a planning process group processes of project scope management. Now let's look at the controlling process group processes. We have a control scope, a process dedicated to ensure the team only works on what is included in the project scope. There is a possibility that we have identified scope X, but team might have deviated to X.2, X.3 while executing. So the control scope is a process which helps us in identifying those variances and identifying what corrective and preventive actions can be taken. A control scope may result or may generate a change request in order to bring the project team back to a scope or get the scope statement changed, because you may identify that something cannot be done which was agreed or visualized before. We have one more process that is also falling under the monitoring and controlling process group, and this process is about validate scope. Now validate scope is to do with taking customer acceptance for a given project work. In this process, we go to the customer and we share, these are our deliverables, these were the acceptance criteria, now accept it. We seek a customer acceptance. So when you prepare for PMP, you can expect a good amount of acquisition of knowledge in all these project scope management related processes. A third knowledge area, project time management. This is all about managing time. Now whenever you start a project management job or a work or a role, usually project management is looked as a schedule management job. You just need to keep telling when are you going to deliver it. And this knowledge area is all about answering that question, that when this project is getting finished, when are we planning to deliver it. In order to bring that date or in order to calculate that date, you need to do a good amount of groundwork. You need to break down your scope and identify actionable activities. Activities which could be sequenced, which could be resourced, which could be planned in a way that it produces a project outcomes or a project outputs in the shortest possible time. And this knowledge area is all about playing with those sequences and calculating time. Now if you look at our two-dimensional matrix, process groups and knowledge area, in project time management we have 6 processes in planning process group, because this knowledge area is primarily a planning heavy knowledge area. Here first we start with making a plan for how are we going to manage our scheduling activity. After that, in a second process, define activity, we identify what all activities we need to perform in order to get our work done. Then these activities need to be sequenced. Like we need to identify dependencies. A activity can only be started once the activity B is complete. This is a dependency. And if you have this dependency, you need to identify it and sequence them. That's the third process is all about. After that, you need to identify what all resources, maybe human resource, but also the engineering resource or other resources do you need in order to perform that activity. After identifying the resources, you also need to estimate how much time an individual activity is going to take given the resources, given the other scope of work defined. Now, after that, you have a collection of activities which are also sequenced, which are having a duration and resource estimation attached. Now we need to bind all these things together, and we need to prepare a complete schedule which gives us a project and dates. And identifying or binding these activities in a one logical network diagram and identifying their early starts and early finish is all about a process called a develop schedule. Now this is the final process of a planning process group of time management knowledge area. because here we get a schedule which will go back to a project integration management knowledge area and will become part of project management plan. After doing this planning, execution will happen in coordination with project integration management. We get to a control schedule process. A process under monitoring and controlling process group, and a process which is responsible for ensuring or identifying the variances between the plan and the execution, giving us an important trigger to help or control our project in a given time frame. A project cost management. So till now we have seen various knowledge areas: integration, scope, time, and now it's all about cost. In a PMP exam, you end up studying all these knowledge area at length. And this knowledge area is all about money. You estimate how much money this activity is going to take. So you estimate at a bottom level. Sometimes you may directly estimate at the top level. But ultimately, this knowledge area will give you a project budget to start with. And this knowledge area also gives you tools and techniques to ensure that project remains under your estimated cost, your estimated budget. So cost control related processes also falls under this particular knowledge area. If you look at process groups, in a planning process group, we have 3 processes, and we have one process in monitoring and controlling process group. Now, as with other knowledge area, we start with a plan. We need to make a plan. How are we going to perform our cost management activities? And that plan is performed in a first process. After that, we need to estimate cost at the bottom level. We estimate cost at the work package level, even sometime at an activities level. And these estimated costs, which are done in a second process, further need to consolidate it or aggregate it at a higher level, and we create budget. And that is where our third process is all about. Now the third process, which is an end process of a planning process group for a cost management, gives us a term called cost baseline, a benchmark for our project execution. And this cost baseline also goes to an integrated project management plan and helps other processes also to look at. Now once we have this cost baseline, we start with our execution work. We keep doing executing activities, and the control cost is a controlling process of cost management which look at the money dimension of plan versus actual. It looks at what was an expected expense, what is an expected expense for a given month, and what was the real expense happened in that particular month. It generates various types of variance report. You may also use tools and techniques given in this process to forecast your project cost. Given the experience at hand, like after executing part of your project, you may know where this is going to end or how much money it will take before you finish this particular project. Our fifth knowledge area is project quality management. In this knowledge area, we talk about qualities. This knowledge area gives us some ideas about various quality principles and theories. It tells us that in nowadays, inspection is no more looked as quality assurance tool. We need to build quality inside the system. Now, your project is a temporary endeavor. You will deliver an output and your team will get dismantled. But the organization has to support this project or an outcome of this project, a product, for a longer duration. So whatever quality principles or guidelines organization has to ensure that they can support their product in a long term should be implemented in your project. So this knowledge area helps us in doing all quality related activities. Now we look at process groups. Now quality management has 3 processes: planning, executing, monitoring and controlling. In the planning process of quality management knowledge area, we come up with quality management plan, a process improvement plan. which helps us in telling our project teams that how they should plan quality related activities in a given project. The quality assurance, the executing process group process, is all about adhering to a quality management plan, following the checklist, following the right process of delivering deliverables. This process is an executing process, means we need to apply these things along with our development work. And then we have a controlling process, which is more like an inspection process. The controlling process of a quality management knowledge area ensures or looked at deliverable and a scope and try to verify that is this particular deliverable meeting the quality guidelines, meeting the scope expectations. It's an inspection process. So we follow inspection related activities in this process. Now, this knowledge area is all about us managing human resources, because in your project you need good amount of human resource. Now, PMBOK, as far as you are going for a PMP certification, you need to think about a complex projects, the projects which may involve more than 100 people. So in this knowledge area, we talks about how are you going to acquire those individuals, develop them as a one team, and then going to develop individuals so that you can achieve your project goals. Now, unlike other knowledge areas, project human resource management does not have a process in monitoring and controlling process group. It has processes in planning and executing process group, because we don't have a variance analysis of individuals. We talk about developing individuals, and development of individuals is an ongoing effort. It should not be looked at as a periodic monitoring and control effort. So this process, a knowledge area, start with a process which gives us a plan for managing our human resource, plan for reward and recognition, plan for acquiring human resource and releasing them. So we come up with a human resource plan, and after that we need to acquire people. So when we get into executing process group, first we acquire people by way of hiring them, by way of taking from other project teams. We may end up creating team with virtual locations, like people working from different geography, which is also called a virtual team. After acquiring people, they are just collection. We need to develop them as a one unit, as in a team, so they start delivering. The second process in executing process group talks about that only. And after that, developing a team, we need to manage teams and individuals. We need to manage conflicts. We need to manage individuals' performance. So these activities, this kind of skills and knowledges falls under human resource management knowledge area. Project communication management. So what is communication? A good communication is the one where I can transfer my thought to you. So communication is a process where we transfer our thoughts, our instructions, our thinking process to someone else. And as a project manager, majority of your time goes in either communicating to your team members about the project goals or communicating the stakeholders about the project status. And that is why we say that project communication is an essential skill of a project manager. All knowledge area will have element of project communication. For example, if you have prepared a very good time plan, you have prepared a very good schedule, it doesn't make any difference till the time you communicate the same effectively to the stakeholder. Again, for example, you have prepared a cost budget, but there is a variance with your execution. Your execution is well ahead than your budgeted amount. You need to use effective communication so that this thing get highlighted. So in this knowledge area, we talk about how do we identify communication needs and also identifying communication management plan, like at what frequency we are going to communicate information to which set of individuals, so we can keep the complete project community on the same page. If you talk about processes and process groups, it has 3 processes. Planning about communication, managing communication, like doing the communication work, falls under executing process group, and controlling communication. If somebody asks you that I am not getting this particular information, I am expected to get weekly report, you falls under control communication. You ensure that yes, if it was agreed during the communication management plan that this person should get a weekly report, he should get it. So control communication is all about ensuring that your communication management plan is getting followed, or identifying why and when your communication management plan has to be changed. It's possible that you miss someone while planning your communication initially, and at the later point of stage you need to generate a change request and include that individual into your communication management plan. That you can do with change request, without change request. That's a relatively a big topic, but the top idea is all communication related activity happen in project communication management knowledge area. Project risk management. Now whatever we plan, whatever we do, there will be always a risk. Now this knowledge area talks about, yes, we need to identify those risks, make some repository of it, prioritize them on the basis of their probability and impacts, and do some responses and monetarily review, continuously review your risk management process. So skills, tools and techniques which is needed for managing project risk efficiently falls under project risk management knowledge area. Now when we look at processes and process groups in project risk management, we have 5 processes in planning process group, and we have a 1 process in controlling process group. Now this planning process group processes starts from first making a risk management plan. We come up, what is our definition of high impact? What is our definition of most likely risk? Now those kind of definition, those kind of thresholds we identify in our risk management plan. We also tell that how are we going to do a risk management in our project in a risk management plan. So once we are done with that planning process, we need to do an identification of risk. A second process which helps us in identifying project risk. We may use checklists, we may do an assumption analysis of our various documents and may do a brainstorming, ask experts. We can use various tools and techniques to identify risk, and then we prepare a big risk register. Now these all risks we cannot take care of. We have a limited amount of energy and resources, so we need to prioritize them. In order to prioritize them, we do a qualitative risk assessment. So we assess risk on the basis of their likelihood and impact, and we prioritize which all risks are the one we must take care of, because those are the ones which can derail our project significantly. Now for some of these significant risks, we may do a quantitative risk assessment also. In a quantitative risk assessment, we try to identify an expected financial value of those risks, expected monetary value of those risks. We also use data which is coming from our historical informations. Now till this stage, we have done planning, identification and assessment. After that, we need to respond to the risk. We can use various risk response options, like we can think of avoiding the risk by way of changing our approach, or we can think of taking a outsourced work or transferring a risk to someone else, or we can also follow mitigation or a contingency reserve strategies. After doing all this planning, we start working, or the execution happen. During execution, we may uncover some of those risks and our risk management plan get implemented. Now in a control risk process, we try to analyze how effectively our risk management process is working. We also try to relook at our risk register. We also try to relook at our risk response plans. So this knowledge area teaches us all about project risk management. Project procurement management. Now this is one knowledge area most of you may not find much familiarity with. Because it is about getting work from someone else, outsourcing part of your work to a vendor or a service provider. Now here you becomes the customer. In this knowledge area, we learn how should we identify a statement of work, how should we invite other vendors for our work, like invitation for quotation, request for proposals, those kind of things comes under this particular knowledge area. This knowledge area also talks about various type of contracts like fixed price, cost reimbursable, time and material. This process also talks about we should do a continuous monitoring and interaction with our vendor, the one who is taking the work to their office for completing our project. Now if you look at processes and process groups, this knowledge area has fairly good distribution. It has 4 processes and following under 4 process groups. So we start with plan, we make a procurement plan, we try to identify what all work we are going to outsource. Why are we going to outsource? Because we do make or buy decision kind of analysis. We also try to identify what criteria we should be using when we select a vendor. So after making those plans, we conduct procurement. The conduct procurement process is a big process which starts with identifying vendors and inviting them for a given piece of work, following the complete selection process, and at the end rewarding the work to a given vendor. So all these knowledge, tools and techniques falls under conduct procurement. At the end, vendor has taken the work and he is doing things. Now we have a monitoring and controlling process group process called control procurement. Now this control procurement is all about looking into vendor's execution, looking into the reports which vendor is submitting us on the basis of various milestones. If we are following a cost reimbursable process, it may also involve checking the expenses the vendor is making, because ultimately in case of a cost reimbursable, we are the one who are paying the bill. So monitoring or controlling the outsourced work falls under control procurement. Now we are done with the outsourced work. Ultimately that outsourced contract has to be closed. So the closed procurement is the final process of project procurement management knowledge area, and it has tools and techniques which helps us in closing a contract, in closing a procurement work. We do all final settlement, we resolve all the disputes, and finally we close the given contract. Now project stakeholder management, a new knowledge area which has come or which got introduced in PMBOK 5th edition. This knowledge area focuses on engaging stakeholder. Though the name of this knowledge area is stakeholder management, but the content of this knowledge area is pointing towards we need to engage stakeholders. No more management, but more about engagement. So we need to identify engagement strategies. We need to identify the needs, the information needs of the stakeholder, and we need to keep them satisfied, informed, so that we manage our project objectives with stakeholder engagement. Now if you talk about process and process groups, this knowledge area has 4 processes and they are falling under 4 process groups, a fairly good distribution. It starts from identifying stakeholders. Since it's the initiating process group activity, in this process we end up with a list of individuals, groups, institutions, bodies which may have positive or negative impact coming out of our project. So they are getting influenced because of our project. Now after making that list, we need to plan how are we going to engage them. Same like other knowledge areas, this knowledge area also has a process for planning the work. So we plan how are we going to engage stakeholder. After doing the planning, we do the execution. We manage the stakeholder engagement and ensure that desired level of involvement is achieved. And to cross-check, are we following those plans? Do we need to change the stakeholder engagement strategy? Do we need to generate some change request where one new stakeholder has to be included in a given report? those kind of things are done under control stakeholder engagement, a monitoring and controlling process group process of stakeholder management. So project stakeholder management, a knowledge area which teaches us all about managing our stakeholders. So whatever I have discussed in this presentation is finally compiled in this book. Now, a PMBOK guide 5th edition will be your prime source for your PMP preparation. There are many other books, other learning material, like we have our own video content to facilitate decoding this book. But ultimately for your PMP exam, this is the one reference book which contains subset of project management knowledge and most of the good practices which works in all the domains. A bit about the PMP exam. So in a PMP exam, you will get 200 questions which are coming from the content which we have discussed in this video, the PMBOK 5th edition. The questions would be checking your knowledge, also your skills. So you can expect situational questions also, because you need to interpret various tools and techniques, various knowledges which you have studied in PMBOK in order to apply them in real life. You will get 200 questions and you will get 4 hours to complete that particular exam. Out of these 200 questions, the 25 questions are pre-test questions, like they will not get scored. But this information is of no use for you, because for you, they are just like any other question, because you cannot differentiate them. The only information which you can interpret out of this fact is that usually before the question become a test question or a score question, it goes through a pre-test algorithm, and after observing a set of behavior, PMI makes it a scoreable question. Now you may wonder that do we have any breakup of these 200 questions? Can you know that which knowledge area or a process group will be contributing X number of questions in the final exam? Now PMI has given a breakup or a distribution of questions in process group wise. They have said that out of initiating process group, you can expect 30% questions. From a planning process group, you can expect 24% questions. Now do look at the process groups. Under planning process group, we have 24 processes and we are getting 24%, just 24% of our questions from planning process group. Now, under executing process group, we have 8 processes and we are getting 30% questions from executing process group. So, initiating 30, planning 24, executing 30, monitoring and control 25%, closing 8%. Initiating and closing are high rewarding process groups because they only have two processes, and after that you should focus a lot on executing process group. Now we don't know how PMI calculate the pass ranking. They have not disclosed a passing criteria or a passing percentage mark for the PMP exam. We do get a report where we get a ranking in all these 5 process groups. These 5 process groups are ranked as proficient, moderately proficient or below proficient. So as an output of your PMP exam, you will get a report where these 5 processes are written and you will get a ranking between proficient, moderately proficient or below proficient, and overall a 1 pass-fail rank. Now how much percentage can make you a pass? Not known, but in general, if you prepare well, if you follow, there is a study plan, a video of a study plan at our YouTube channel. If you follow our study plan video, there is high probability that you will succeed in your exam in your first attempt. Now in this video, I try to communicate content outline of PMP certification. My goal was to prepare a test taker about a PMP certification exam, to communicate what all learning knowledge you can acquire by doing a PMP certification. If you are aspiring for PMP certification, do join our forum. There we try to do various interaction related to project management certification. We also conduct various live events. So be part of the community and achieve your certification journey in shortest possible time. Thanks for watching our video on PMP content outline.